What's good, y'all? Welcome back to Believing in Miami Heat, brought to you by the Believe Network. As always, I'm your host, Anthony DiNardo. Now, this is actually my third time doing this type of video. Y'all read the title. My first time doing this was a couple years ago when we first got Kyle Lowry. And since then, I've had some great predictions, like Kyle Lowry being ass. I said Caleb Martin was going to be great. And I've also had some really bad predictions. I said Omer Yurtseven would be the starting center for this team for a very long time. That obviously didn't pan out, but I basically got some notes about every player on the roster, and we go through them all right now, starting with who I think will be the starting point guard, probably point guard, if you can even call him that, is our guy Josh Richardson, who is crazy that he is now 30 years old. Now, he just turned 30, like I think it was this month, last month, something like that. So he's a young 30, if you can call him that. Of course, we still all know him as Rook 2. We think of him as a kid, but he's a full-blown vet now. And he's on the wrong side of 30 now, but obviously not too old. I think the biggest thing that he's going to contribute to this team is his defensive ability, his point of attack defense, which is more critical than ever because you lost Gabe Vincent and you're left with Kyle Lowry and Tyler Hero, who can't guard the point of attack, at least from the guard position. So I think he's going to be perfect for that. Now, again, he's a little bit older. How well of a perimeter defender is he still? I don't know. I certainly haven't been watching Josh Richardson from Boston to Dallas to Philly to New Orleans and San Antonio. Man, he's bounced around a lot. I certainly haven't really been keyed in on him for the last few years, so I don't know how much of that defensive ability he still has left, but I'm assuming it's still enough to actually be a contributor to this team in that way, because Lord knows they'll need it, particularly if he's starting next to Tyler Hero, who we'll get into later. And I guess I should say I'm recording this the day before the first preseason game, so maybe a lot of my thoughts will change throughout the preseason, but I wanted to get all my thoughts out prior to that. But a little bit more on Josh Richardson. I remember back when he was a rookie, he shot like 46% from three that year. I remember he was working with the shooting coach to change his footing, the way he was positioning it, pointing towards the hoop, and had a phenomenal shooting rookie season. Thought he was going to be a lights-out sniper. Died down a little bit after that. He was a 37% from three for the rest of his Heat tenure, his career, and last year, which was a combination of him in San Antonio and New Orleans. But he's still a very solid shooter, obviously, at 37%. And he was at his highest points per game total was with the Heat that year, where they tried to make him the guy. He got up to 16.6 points per game. He obviously, we found out real quick, he can't be the guy. Y'all remember he used to always step out of bounds with the game on the line. Happened like at least 4 or 5 times, I feel like. So we're not going to ever look at him as the guy or as a guy, here's the ball, go get a bucket. But he's certainly a guy that's capable of scoring. He can get in the mid-range a little bit too. He's obviously very athletic as a younger guy too. Could attack the basket, had some posters. So he can get a bucket sometimes. And obviously you want him to defend a lot. And as far as facilitating, he doesn't provide much of that. That's why that point, he may be labeled the starting point guard, but the facilitator roles will kind of be shared by everybody in that spot. So I'm really looking forward to Richardson. I think he's going to be a great player on this team. And I'm not going to spend that much time talking about everyone, just Richardson, because he's one of the few new additions that we have, if you can even call him new, but that's Josh Richardson. Moving over to who will definitely be the starting 2-guard spot is Tyler Hero. Now, I was a little disappointed in his 4th season, right? Because when you look at a young player, you say their 3rd season is telling, usually. If they have a great 3rd year, a great junior year, they'll be a great player. And that's what Tyler Hero was. He obviously won 6th man of the year, 20 points per game. And then his 4th year, you didn't really see any progress. And people said, okay, well, he was kind of the same, shot basically 20, or had basically 20 points per game again. But his efficiency was less from the field and the 3-point line. Not much, but you're talking by a couple percentage points. So when your minutes go up, your points stay the same and your efficiency goes down, that's generally not a great sign. And not to mention he had the same exact amount of rebounds and assists per game as well. Now, he has shown flashes as a playmaker. I like a lot of stuff we saw with him and Bam, a little bit from the pick and roll. Not as much as you'd see from, a traditional point guard type, but he's shown the ability to do that. And I think now that he'll be in a role where he has to do that more, maybe that's something we'll see a little bit more of Tyler Hero is the playmaking side, because they did try to start him at point guard. I think it was 2 years ago. It didn't work well at all. That's why he went back to the bench, but he's an older player now. He's more experienced than he was then. So I'm not ready to count that sample size as from 2 years ago and think it's going to mean anything. So I am looking forward to seeing how he thrives as a playmaker this season. But I do actually have a super hot take about him. It's that Tyler Hero will make the All-Star game this season. So y'all book it. Remember, I said it in this, prediction, thought video, whatever you want to call it. He's going to make the All-Star game. Few things need to happen for that. Is one, the Heat need to be a top 3 seed. If they are, I think they'll get 2 All-Stars. Jimmy, we obviously doesn't care about the regular season too much, so I think you'll get Bam, and I think you'll get Tyler. Tyler will also need to score. He'll need a decent uptick in points. If he's at least 23 points per game, I think he has a shot. Now, Tyler Hero, I have the utmost confidence that he's going to have a phenomenal year. I think he's going to ball the F out this season because he has the exact mentality you want of a young guy who's been in all of these trade rumors. He has the ultimate chip on his shoulder. Now, does he have the talent to go out there and prove everyone wrong? I think so. But what's undoubtable is his mentality and everything that he's went through this offseason and all the last offseasons, from the Giannis trade rumors to the Harden to the Mitchell to the KD to the Dame. And I think after the Dame, which is the loudest smoke that we've heard, this is the year that I think he's really, really going to take off. The utmost confidence in him. Obviously, you want to see him stay healthy come playoff time. That's a bit of his biggest concern. I said last postseason was a make it or break it postseason, and he got hurt in game 1. So kind of grade him an incomplete on that. But I think he's going to have a monster All-Star season. Starting small forward on this team is Jimmy Butler. I've said year after year, he is the definition of a superstar. I don't have to talk it that much because every year you get doubters and every year he proves it wrong. And the people that know ball watching this video, which is most of y'all, my audience knows ball. That's why I appreciate y'all. You know he's a superstar. Surprisingly, he actually shot 35% from 3 last year after being sub 25% for the rest of his Heat tenure. But we know come playoff time, he turns into prime Ray Allen. I have no doubts about Jimmy Butler. He may coast in the regular season, but come playoff time, he's him. Moving on to the starting power forward. Could be Kevin Love. I really like what Kevin Love brought last year as well. He was the only move they made last year in the buyout market, of course, after being one of only 2 teams to do nothing at the trade deadline. We knew that the team prior to Kevin Love was getting stale. They had the same guys on the roster for like 3 years now, and they've even said themselves that bringing in Kevin Love, having that fresh face, really just rejuvenated kind of the whole roster. And his play in the regular season was kind of mid. He didn't shoot great from 3. I think he was only at like 33% or something like that. But come postseason, he was up to like 37%. We saw what he did in the Bucks series, rotating on defense, drawing charges. That was so critical to how they guarded Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks. I think they're going to need that this year again, particularly against that team. Outside of that, I think he's going to have a relatively small role in the regular season. Maybe have what I like to call that Myers Leonard, Luke Babbitt role. Not just to name white shooters, but those roles both, they just so happen to have the role of like start the first 7 minutes of the game and the first 7 minutes of the second half, and they never played besides that. I think we're going to see that with Kevin Love this regular season, partly just because he's older. But I think come critical time, particularly against the Bucks, he's going to have a major role. And he was still a good rebounder last year, and the outlet pass was great. So the things that he does well, he still did well last season, and I think they were positive for the Miami Heat. Starting center is obviously Bam Adebayo, who I think is finally ready to take even another step and be the man for this franchise. I mean, some could argue that he was given the keys to the team last season, but I think this season is even going to be more so of that, especially considering that made the All-Star team again last year after missing it the year prior because of injury, and obviously he made it the year before that. But he had a career-high points per game last season, was the best scorer on the Heat in the NBA Finals. There was obviously a lot of frustration before that because he was not aggressive in the postseason. I remember last season, actually kind of post-All-Star break, he was pretty disappointing. He kind of started to revert back to that old Bam who was kind of scared to shoot, which was one of the most frustrating things to me. But Bam started last season strong. I think he's going to do the same this year. I think he's going to be that ultra-aggressive Bam, not shooting threes, but he'll take the mid-range shots. He'll take that dotted line. Usually it was, spot up front of the basket. Maybe his next step is taking it a little bit more from the wing, that kind of Chris Bosh area, which would do wonders for this team. I think that's really the next step for Bam. You want to see him get his rebounds back up, hopefully to over 10 per game. And he's always going to be the best defender in the NBA, in my eyes. I don't think it's debatable because he's probably the only person that can truly guard 1 through 5, but I'm not here to debate that. He's going to start the season very strong. I need him to end it very strong this season. And if he can average over 20 points per game, great season by Bam Adebayo. And I think we may see it. Moving on to the bench role. Guy who may start, Caleb Martin, obviously one of everybody's favorites, including myself. I would have thrown him into a Damian Lillard trade for Dame. I would have been reluctant because I think Caleb is going to be that important to this team. But that being said, I'm not trading him for James Harden or Buddy Hield or anybody except Damian Lillard, I suppose. I mean, if Joel Embiid, wants out, we'll talk again. But for now, I think Caleb Martin is going to be that critical to this team. Again, you lost Gabe Vincent, point of attack defender. You did get Josh Richardson, but Caleb Martin, I think, will be your primary guard defender because you're going to have Bam on bigs. And in the regular season, Jimmy is not going to try as hard defensively as he will in the postseason. So I'm talking regular season. Caleb's defense is going to be the most important part of his game, I believe. Now, last year, he really wasn't doing in the regular season what he did in the postseason. He was hitting his threes, which for some reason, every time Caleb Martin shoots, I feel like it's going in. Now, he has this weird little hitch. He kind of fixed it. But still, I always felt like it was going in. And he shot 36% last year in the regular season, which is good. Obviously, had an uptick come postseason. But at the bare minimum, he'll play defense, hit the three. But I think this year, he's ready to take a jump offensively as well. Obviously, this team is going to need it given that they've lost Max Strus, who was a big scorer, big shooter for this team. I think Caleb's going to expand off the offensive game that we saw in the postseason last year. He's not going to average 20 points a night like he did in the Boston series, but in that series, he was taking mid-range shots, attacking the basket with the left hand, right hand, fadeaways. I think we are going to see a mix of all of that in the regular season simply because he's going to be asked to do more. I mean, you saw what this guy did in the postseason, and if I told you that he averaged under 10 points per game in the regular season last year, that would be hard to believe, but it's true. But obviously, a lot of that is because of his role, and he was with the starters a lot of last year. This year, I'm not sure if he will start. It'll either be him, I guess Kevin Love, or Hayward Highsmith, who we'll get into in a little bit. But he may start, he may not. Either way, I think he's going to have a big role. I think he's going to have a huge uptick in offensive production. Wow, still being one of the primary defenders. Keep in mind. So maybe we see him around 15 points per game will be a lot this season. I'd love to see 15. If you get 15 points a night from Caleb Martin, this team is going to be a top 2 seed in the conference. They really will be. I'm going to hope to get at least 13 though, at the minimum, kind of 15 on the high end. But he's going to be just absolutely critical for this team. I'm a huge fan of him. Still super young, and I think he's gonna take just another jump this season, which could be tough because he's going to opt out of his player option in the offseason, and they either going to have to pay him or lose him. So we'll see what happens with regards to him. Next, you got who's probably going to be the backup, maybe starting point guard, if you ask him, Kyle Lowry. Not a fan of Kyle Lowry. For the most part, people agree with me. I just dropped a whole video about Kyle Lowry because I don't actually think he's going to be on this roster after the trade deadline, and he may be gone sooner than later. 90% of people agreed with me. The 10% that didn't said I need to give him another chance. He was hurt last year, and I have to tell those people that when you're 37, 38 years old, whatever Kyle Lowry is, you typically don't get more healthy as you get older. You typically, when you're already regressing, you typically don't get better, and that's what we've seen with Kyle Lowry. Now, yes, he did have his moments in the playoffs last year, but then he kind of fell off again. If there's any way they're able to limit him to 40-something games this year and manage him like that and have him for the postseason, I think he can be a contributor in the postseason because he still is a high IQ player, although he takes some of the dumbest shots I've ever seen in transition. He'll pull up from 3 when the team has a bunch of momentum, then he kills it. But he obviously still knows how to get to his spots in the postseason, and he does have a lot of those veteran savvy tricks that are beneficial in the postseason. I mean, I don't think you can understate championship DNA, which he has. He actually has that experience. He won with the Raptors. I do believe that stuff is important come postseason, especially with Udonis Haslem gone. Maybe they need another old veteran leader who's won a championship. Obviously, Haslem has way more pull because he's Mr. Miami. He's been here for 20 years. I don't think Kyle Lowry has that pull, especially considering like all the conditioning issues and stuff. But I'm not a fan of Kyle Lowry. I don't think he's going to have a big season, and I think he's going to be off this roster by trade deadline. But obviously, I'm a fan of this team. I hope he proves me wrong. Another guy I hope I'm wrong about is Duncan Robinson, who I was very disappointed last season. I was he was my favorite player in the league, right? That year that he broke out, which is, what are we talking, 2020, came out of nowhere, broke the team record for threes, had all the NBA records for youngest player to 100 threes, 200 threes, 300, and so on. But then he was not as good the year after, had like 35%. But then last season, he shot under 33% on high volume, like 4.6 attempts. And that's terrible. For a designated shooter to shoot under 33%, there's no way I can talk. What's the word for even how awful he was? He was abysmal. He was awful, to pull a word out of Chuck's book. Does Charles Barkley say awful? No, he just says horrible. I think my boy Santi says awful. Shout out Santi Goated Gaming on YouTube. Anyways, he was terrible. And Duncan Robinson, we know he's a god-awful defender. So when you and we could live with the god-awful defense when he was shooting 45% from three. When you're shooting under 33%, that's a different story. Now, come postseason, he was decent. Come finals, he was okay. You know, are we going to is that going to transition into the regular season? I hope so. I just don't think so, because for all of last regular season, he was awful. He was getting DNP coaches' decisions. That's a guy that's making like $18 million a year, not playing only because he's not good enough. Now, he had a little bit of a finger injury last year too, but for the most part, when he was healthy, he didn't play because he was terrible. Now, he'll play this year. You lost Max Strus, your only designated shooter. I mean, Tyler could obviously shoot, but it's Duncan Robinson. He's going to play unless they're able to move him and bring in like Drew Peterson or Cole Swider, who we'll talk a little bit about later, but he's going to play. You got to be better though, Duncan Robinson. I don't have the utmost faith in you at this point because I believed in you for too long. That's why I'm kind of disappointed in him, because when he was struggling last year and all of Heat Twitter was bashing him, I kept saying he's going to break out, he's going to break out, he's going to break out. And even 2 years ago, I was saying that when he was struggling. You got to the playoffs. Remember that first game versus Atlanta 2 years ago? Had like 7 to 8 from three. It was actually the most efficient game in NBA history. I started telling everyone, I said, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so. And then he couldn't hit a shot the rest of the playoffs. And then the next season, which was last, couldn't shoot all regular season. So I'm done putting faith in Duncan Robinson. You know, prove it to me. You want me to believe in you? Prove it to me. And I hope he does. Let's move on to Haywood Highsmith, or as my guy Royal Shepherd of the Basement Sports Network calls him, Shameless Highsmith. I actually don't know why he calls him Shameless. I should ask him. Everybody loves Haywood Highsmith. They think he's going to be the next 3-and-D, switchy 4 defender for the Miami Heat that every team needs, and particularly the type of guy that Spo loves. I see the vision, of course. I mean, what is he, 6'9"? He can move a little bit. He can hit the corner three. I just feel like he's so awful at everything else. I feel like every time he tried to dribble, he turned the ball over. I feel like every time he tried to pass, he turned the ball over. And even the times that he was playing good defense, the other team still scored. Never in my life have I heard the announcer say more, that's great defense, better offense, than when Haywood Highsmith is guarding someone. For some reason, maybe he's just unlucky. I don't know. But I still feel like he's getting scored on, even though visually it looks like good defense. But hey, the Heat obviously have him on this team for a reason. I suppose they believe in him. And I've had people say that to me, say, hey, if the Heat believe in him, why don't you believe in him? Well, how much do the Heat actually believe him? Because you saw in the finals, he played. I thought he played well. But then he never played again after like game 2. And you got Cody Zeller in game 5 instead, who we all knew was terrible. But Spo still chose to play Cody Zeller over Highsmith. So what does that tell you what they think of Haywood Highsmith? I don't know. He's still young. And I think he's going to have a big rotation or big role on this team too. So time will tell. But I'm just not his biggest fan. So moving on from being negative for a few guys in a row, we'll go to someone that I'm actually pretty positive about, which is Thomas Bryant. I want to make one thing very clear. He's an awful defender. There was a tweet going viral the other day. Someone was saying that the closing lineup for the Heat defensively should be Thomas Bryant. Just because he's big does not mean he's good. He cannot guard a guy like Nikola Jovic. Not that anybody really can. But that's not why you have him on this team. You got your bigs that could defend. You got your Bam. You got Highsmith is, I guess people consider you big that can defend. Orlando Robinson's not a great defender either. But I think they're going to look at Thomas Bryant just as a guy who can get rebounds, be big for the sake of being big, which they needed last year, particularly for the rebounding purpose. That's kind of all the same thing there. And he can score a little bit. I think people are going to be surprised by his ability to shoot the three. For his career, he averages 1.4 attempts per game, and he actually got over 2 attempts per game twice in his career, back when he was with Washington. And I remember him with Washington. It was like the 10th game of the year. He actually tore his ACL versus the Heat. I don't know if some people may remember that game. And I was sad at the time because I thought he was going to be a very good player and stuff. But he's obviously recovered. And I think he's turned into a decent player. Was decent with the Lakers, wanted more playing time. So they traded him to Denver, which sucked for him because he never played behind Nikola Jokic. So maybe at this point, he finally gets some actual run at the backup center role and can show everybody what he can truly do. So I'm a fan of his. I don't think he'll have a massive role because he will split times with Orlando Robinson and himself. But I think as the regular season goes on, Spo will kind of decide which one of those two guys he likes more and rely on them. Because you do got Orlando Robinson, was phenomenal in this past summer league, is very big. He's not super fast, which was a little frustrating. So I think in a zone or a switchy defense, he may struggle a little bit there. But offensively, he's very solid, and defense and rebounding is something that he can provide also. So a little similar to Thomas Bryant in that spot, because we saw Orlando Robinson chucking from three in the preseason or the summer league as well. I don't know how much of that is going to carry over. But again, he's another big guy. And sometimes you just need guys who are big for the sake of being big. Now, it didn't work with Dwayne Dedmon. It didn't work with Cody Zeller, but those guys were kind of pussies. Sorry. So hopefully these guys aren't. And then they can provide some sort of size to this team that they desperately need. But I like Orlando Robinson, same as Thomas Bryant. He'll get some run at the backup center spot, and Spo will decide as the season goes on who he wants to kind of lean on. Moving on, the final two guys on the official 13-man that they have on the roster, the two young guys, Nikola Jovic, who we saw ball out in FIBA as they lost. They took home the silver medal versus Germany. Very exciting to watch. The little sweetener, as my guy Brendan Tobin calls him, because he always tries to throw him in trade packages. But we got Jovic. I don't have to worry about getting Dame and losing Jovic and him becoming a Hall of Famer no more, because he certainly has that potential. I mean, you talk about a 6'11 guy with his offensive skill set. I mean, could shoot the ball, could pass, could rebound, could run the floor. You're talking about a guy who does all that, and he put on 30 pounds since he was a rookie. If you watch Nikola Jovic in FIBA, you can see a visible difference in his size and his strength. And it's translated to his game. In the summer league, we saw him attacking the basket, getting and ones, boxing guys out. Those aren't things we saw in his limited action as a rookie. He only played 14 games as a rookie, but those aren't things that we saw. And again, this team is going to need bodies. Because of that, I think he's going to have a role on this team. And just like the whole Robinson and Bryant debate, it's going to depend on Haywood Highsmith. I think that's going to kind of be who he's fighting minutes for. If he's hitting shots and doing all those things we've seen him be capable of, Highsmith is never going to see the floor unless Jovic is a complete turnstile on defense. But if he's at least capable, then we're going to see him on the court a lot this season because he can stretch the floor. And if he does that well, maybe he's starting for Kevin Love by the end of the season. I don't think he will be, but I do expect to see about 50 to 60 games in Nikola Jovic this season on maybe 20 minutes a night. And I think he's going to be a decent scorer, a decent passer. And I think by next year is when we're really going to see him maybe take on a solid role on this team, and maybe even start. But as for this season, I think he's going to have about 20 minutes a game, 60 games, like I said, and I think he's going to play well. The last young guy is Jaime Jaquez Jr., the boy I call Kamehameha Jaquez. I'm not sure how much he'll play this year either, I guess, because he's about 6'6", and they asked him what position he plays. He said whatever they need, which is a good answer. He could play maybe from the 2 to the 4. So this will kind of depend, I think, maybe on how other guys are performing and injuries. I haven't gave really great predictions this video because I know I said it depends a lot, but this is a weird Heat team, right? You got a lot of very similar players, and you lost a lot of key pieces from last year, or at least Gabe and Strus, who had defined roles, starting point guard, designated shooter. You lost those two guys, and now you just kind of got a bunch of leftovers almost. One of them being a 22-year-old rookie who they drafted because he's NBA ready. But does that mean he's going to play over Haywood Highsmith, who I think Spoelstra likes, who played in the NBA Finals? Does that mean he's going to play over Nikola Jovic, who's been in the team for a whole year now? Does that mean Jaquez is going to play over Kevin Love, another NBA championship guy? I don't know. But he can certainly do a lot of similar things that Jovic can as far as stretching the floor a little bit, attack the basket a little bit. I think he's a better I don't want to say better scorer than Jovic, but I think he's more of a scorer than Jovic, where I look at Jovic as a guy that could pass and score. I look at Jaquez as just a scorer guy. I'll be interested to see what he does on the defensive end as an athletic guy who is kind of a bigger 6'6". So I think he may have a similar role as Jovic this year. That'll depend a lot, but I do like him a lot as a player, so I think he'll have a good season. And again, maybe we're talking next season and the year after that is where he really starts to get an actual defined every night role on this roster. Moving on to the two-way guys, I just got very little thoughts. The first one, Drew Smith, who's really the only other true point guard on this team outside of Kyle Lowry. I'm not a fan. I don't like you. I don't know why you're on this roster. I was so happy when the Brooklyn Nets got you, and now you're back. Don't really feel like you provide anything. Now, I've already heard that he's been a standout in camp, but I feel like we hear that about everybody. I just don't see what he provides out there. He doesn't even come across as a good facilitator to me. I kind of like Jamaree Bouyea because you could at least see what he was doing out there. He had his mid-range spot on the floor where he could score from. He had something tangible. Drew Smith just looks like a guy who doesn't make mistakes, which maybe is what you need when you're on a roster that's lacking guys. So it's maybe not the worst thing. The next two-way spot you got is Jamal Cain, who is a guy who has the tools that I think in 3 or 4 years this team can develop into a really great player. Maybe not even 2 or 3, 4 years, because usually with this Heat team, we see them get guys in the second season, whether it's Derrick Jones Jr. or Caleb Martin, for example. They develop these undrafted guys relatively quick, and this would be Jamal Cain's second season. Now, there's obviously a lot of guys ahead of him, so I don't think he'll get a major role this year. I think he'll just kind of be a guy when you get some injuries where he'll get to play. But because of his athletic ability, his willingness to try very hard on defense, he's shown an ability to stretch the floor. All of those things I think are things that are going to translate very well to what this Heat team wants to do, because he can switch on defense and stretch the floor for guys like Jimmy and Bam who don't shoot. I think he's gonna be on this team for a long time. Will he play that much this year? I don't exactly think so. The last two-way spot they got is the new guy, RJ Hampton, highly recruited out of high school. Played overseas instead of going to college. Was drafted 24 by the Denver Nuggets. Never really played much, and now he's here on the Miami Heat. Interesting, because usually the Heat take these undrafted guys like the Gabes, the Struces, and who do we just say, Jamal Cain, and they turn those undrafted guys into great players. Well, now they're trying to do it with RJ Hampton, who was a very highly touted guy. So we know he has a lot of talent. Can they form that into a solid NBA player? I'm hoping so. I'm very excited to see it. The thing we've heard most so far through camp is about his defensive abilities, which I love to hear because, again, when you lost Gabe, you need more guys to replace that. Truthfully, I'm tired of having these guards that can't guard anybody like Duncan and Tyler and Kyle. They have a lot of them. That's why I want guards that can guard. So hopefully RJ Hampton is one of them. He was a solid three-point shooter, too, throughout his years because he's played, 2 seasons in NBA. Played, obviously very limited run, but he was 36% from 3 in the limited run he got last year. So I was concerned when I started hearing a lot about his defensive stuff that he's a poor shooter, but he at least seems to be capable, which is good because it means he has the tools to maybe turn into a 3-and-D guard, which is something I'm very excited about. So we've been saying for the last couple years now, get Spo some guys with actual talent instead of these undrafted hard workers, and let's see what Spo can do. So now you got a guy who everyone knows has talent. Let's see what Spo can do with it. So that brings us to the 13 guys on the traditional roster, which means they still have 2 open roster spots, by the way, because you can have 15 on the normal roster, dress 13, but they only have 13. You're allowed 3 two-way guys this year. So that was Drew Smith, Jamal Cain, and RJ Hampton. And then they have another 5 guys just for the practice squad roster. By the end of preseason, maybe they sign a couple of them. Maybe they let them walk, so I don't want to talk about them too much as all the moves throughout the rest of the offseason happen. We'll have videos specifically about those, but they got Justin Champiani. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't have any thoughts about him or Cheick Diallo for that matter, except Cheick Diallo is a pretty versatile athletic wing, so maybe they can turn him into something too. And then, of course, you got Drew Peterson, who everyone knows as the shooter. Same with Cole Swider. So if you were to trade Duncan Robinson to another team, we've heard the rumors about Harden and PJ to Miami, Duncan and Lowry to Philly, which I'd love because I'd love to get off Duncan Robinson's contract. maybe if Swider or Peterson turn into a very capable high-level shooter, it makes Duncan Robinson more expandable. And then you also got Alondes Williams, who I don't really have much thoughts on either. But that's kind of my thoughts about the entire roster. These may be completely different after the first preseason game tonight. We'll kind of see how that goes. But let me know what y'all think down below. Let me know if you think I'm tripping talking about anyone, or if you completely agree with me. And most importantly, let me know if you're actually excited for this regular season. I'm worried that it's going to be a drag like it was last season. It was super boring, and you're virtually bringing back the whole roster. But if it is, just get out of the playing game, get to the playoffs, and that's when I'll be very, very excited. I think this team is going to be very good this year, at least come playoff time. Like I'm saying, I want to clarify, they may be miserable regular season, but they just got to get there. And then I always put my trust in Jimmy Butler. But I'll get into my team predictions, and I think I'll even do a win-loss, going through every single win-loss for the whole schedule. I may post something like that and give my actual predictions after the preseason. So we'll get into all that. But let me know if y'all enjoyed. Once again, if you're on the podcast side, you can leave 5 stars. Or if you're watching on the YouTube side, go ahead and comment, like the video. If you want to check out the video, just search Anthony DiNardo on YouTube. But that's all I got for y'all. I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.
Look, pull up in your city, tryna get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.